Well, welcome to part two in our video series about how homes could have been built in 1923. And the reason why I'm going to say could have been built is because they are a variety of different methods used. And I have seen quite a few of them over the years of working in construction. Now, keep in mind, the oldest house I worked on was built around 1922, I believe. And living in Southern California, I don't get these old homes that you might get on the East Coast or even the middle of the country here in the United States. So cut me some slack here. I'm just kind of going to throw out my design here. And keep in mind that the homes were built right on top of the ground back then. They were built on top of wood beams. They were built on top of, they had concrete piers located around the perimeter of the house. And they were even built on top of rocks. They would just simply roll a boulder in here and, kind of level out a hole, dig a hole down for it, set the boulder in, and they were done. So in my model, we are going to use a concrete footing that's going to be 6 inches deep and about 20 inches wide. And it's going to go around the perimeter. And of course, everything that is 6 inches deep is going to be used for the fireplace and the piers that are going to be holding up the center beam. So here we have the front porch, fireplace, and the back porch. Let's go ahead and put our brick walls in here. Our brick walls are going to be about 8 inches wide, which would provide us with 2 rows of bricks running in this direction, which every once in a while we'd run one and change it and run it perpendicular to add strength to the wall. So a good way of building a foundation like this. And of course, our wall is going to be about 18 inches tall. Going to have a crawl space opening in it so that we can access underneath the house, have access to it. Our back porch. Now, on our plan, it didn't provide us with, this could have been wood framing. I chose to build it out of brick. Seemed like it'd be a little easier, more heavy duty. And when I say that, for those of you who live in the snow, even though I don't live in the snow, I would imagine if this was built out of brick, you're coming in, you're taking your boots off, stuff like that. This area is going to be wet all winter, something like that. Then the brick's probably going to work out a little better. So I'm probably building this house a little better than it would have been back in that period. But again, these are options when trying to figure out how these homes were going to be built back in the 1920s. Going to have a slot here for our beam that is going to run to support the floor joist, center of the house. And of course, the beam needs to be raised up to be even with the sill plate, as we can see here. So it's just kind of sitting in a pocket here. And you're probably wondering how all this stuff was attached, how the sill plates were attached. Well, I've actually seen them where they were just sitting right on top of the concrete foundation. Sometimes they might have drove a nail into the wood and in between the mortar. They would try to get it into the mortar in between the bricks. That'd be a little softer spot. And again, their thinking, I'm guessing, their thinking back then was just to position everything, because once you had the floor framed, it would hold everything together. The floor would be framed and the sheathing would be attached to it, providing you with a nice solid foundation that wasn't going to go anywhere unless there was an earthquake, because some of these homes actually would slide off of their foundations in the future. So keep that in mind. If you have an older home like this, you might want to check the foundation. Now, a couple of ways that the beam could have been attached to the piers would have been, they would have just sat right on top and they might have driven a nail into the side, one on each side, couple on each side, might have had a block. This was a common method. They would just simply set the block on top of the pier and then attach the framing to it. Another method, I've seen this plenty of times. It's not going to look as nice as the one that I have here, but they would have simply just threw some mortar on top of the piers. And of course, later on, as there was movement, the mortar would simply just get knocked right off. And again, just a block, not too difficult. They would, this was probably the most common one that I saw. This might have been first, this one here might have been second, but just simply having a block on top of here And maybe you would have some nails going into the pier, trying to stabilize everything. Now let's go ahead and add our fireplace. Take a look at a little ledge that I put in here. I've seen this a lot, even though it might not have been built as nice as the one I have here. This is actually going to be used to support the floor joist instead of installing some type of a doubler and going around it. Next up, let's go ahead and put our front porch in. And again, I'm going to build it out of brick. This might not have been the case back then, but again, my building's going to be a little stronger than the one they probably built back then. Now let's go ahead and wrap this video up by pointing out the fact that they probably would have built the fireplace in sections. So they would have built the fireplace kind of as far as they could have standing in this area. Then they would have built the floor, and then they would have built a little bit more of the fireplace, and then they might have put the ceiling joist in and then worked off of that section to finish it. So they wouldn't have just built the entire fireplace from the ground up. They would have done it in sections as they were building the house. So there it is, our building foundation from 1923 as I would have built it during that time period. No building hardware. We don't have any framing anchors, anchor bolts, or even structural rebar. And who knows how good the concrete would have been back then, how it would have been mixed, where they would have got their sand from. You know, it might not have been very good sand. You might have had larger rocks in your concrete and smaller amounts of concrete to make it easier to tear out in the future, but not as structurally strong as the building foundations today. Now, I will put a link here after the next video is made for the floor and wall framing.